Monster Synthesis Master. Chapter 281. Please return, Sage. Link moved closer to the blood cocoon and peeked through the gap in the purple light. The macaw also stretched its neck and stood at the door. It couldn't help but ask, "Link, can you see anything?" The purple light was obvious and blocked part of his vision. However, when Link looked at the gap, he found that it was as dark as an abyss. He couldn't see anything even with the light. Link frowned. He couldn't be sure if the things inside had really hatched. How long has it been since the blood cocoon's opening? Link turned around and asked. He could only determine the source of the purple light after confirming the time. Vajra pondered for a moment and said, "About 10 minutes ago, I heard a crisp sound in the room. I thought that the blood cocoon had hatched, so I pushed the door open to welcome a new friend. I didn't expect the situation to remain the same for 10 minutes. There was no change, and it even emitted a strange light." Link paced around the blood cocoon. The blood cocoon had not come out after 10 minutes, which was abnormal in itself. There was no light in the room, and it was a cloudy day. Even if vampire bats were afraid of light, they could definitely gallop freely in this level of light. Not to mention that Link had considered this in advance and added sunglasses lenses to block out the sun and ultraviolet rays. Now, there were two possibilities. One possibility was that the purple light came from the synthetic creatures inside, the other possibility was that the fused pet was at the epic level, so it had a purple glow at the beginning of its birth. Link considered for a moment and extended his hand. "Old Jin, bring me a flashlight." The macaw immediately ran out and quickly landed at the door with a flashlight in its mouth. The purple light was dim and blocked his vision. However, the light was not blinding. If there was a clearer light source, Link would be able to see what was inside the blood cocoon. He turned on the flashlight, and a beam of light shot out from the cylinder. Link poured the light into the blood cocoon and was stunned. The inside of the blood cocoon was a hard grey-black material, which gave people the first impression that it was a cement sculpture. Upon closer inspection, Link noticed that his leopard eye actually had half a wing that looked like a vampire bat's. However, it was slightly different from a vampire's. It looked stronger. Link tried to reach into the blood cocoon and immediately touched the cold wing. The feeling was different from what he had expected. It didn't have the rough texture of a cement sculpture. Instead, it had a strange matte and delicate feeling, as if it had been polished thousands of times. At this moment, an ethereal buzzing sound suddenly came from the blood cocoon, like the vibration of energy waves. Link's hand was the key to activating the new life that had no reaction. The blood cocoon, which had been silent for 10 minutes without any reaction, once again emitted a crisp sound. Lightning-like cracks instantly spread across the entire blood cocoon. Pa! A sonic boom suddenly came from within the blood cocoon, shaking the blood cocoon in all directions. The true appearance of the synthesized vampire bats finally appeared. His grey-black body, which was like cement, blended perfectly with the yin sky today. Its wings were retracted, and its wingspan and height were much larger than the vampire bat's. Originally, the blood-sucking bat's body was thin and weak. If it pulled out its wings, there would not be much meat to be seen. It might not even be as good as a larger water rat. But now, the muscles were firm and well-defined, with strong and powerful legs and 3-toed claws. The face still maintained the state of a vampire bat, but it was slightly larger. His eyes flickered with a mysterious red light, and together with his dark grey body, he gave off a shady and mysterious feeling, making it easy for people to associate him with vampires. The most unique thing about it was that it had a pair of demonic horns on its head, which made it look even more evil. Link noticed that there were some uneven cloud patterns on its body. They looked like mysterious runes. It reminded Link of a type of demonic creature from planet Victoria. When the creature saw Link, it opened its mouth slightly and knelt down on one knee. Its 2 arms, together with its wings, were put together in front of its chest. The wide wings covered most of its body. In a trembling and pious voice, it said, Please return, Saint. Only the return of the sage? Link was stunned. Wasn't this something that the Blood Clan often said? He immediately checked the information of his new pet. Monster attributes. Name, Stone Statue Ghost. Grade, Light Purple. Race, Undead. Attribute, Death. Level, 20. Initial Skill 1, Terrifying Shriek LV3, the gargoyle shrieks with the power of death, dealing 600 points of damage to enemies within a 50-meter radius. It will also add a fear status to those with low intelligence. Limited to 3 uses per day. Initial Skill 2, Group Taunt LVL4, gargoyles taunt enemies within 30 meters of them and forcefully limit the enemy's attack target to themselves. Lasts for 5 seconds. When the taunt skill is used, gargoyles' defense increases by 40%. Limited to 2 uses per day. Initial Skill 3, War Tempest LV1, gargoyle flaps its wings to release a violent gust of wind that is 30 meters long. Deals 200 damage to enemies along the way and increases the movement speed of teammates by 10%. Limited to 2 uses per day. Initial Skill 4, Gargoyle Form, when a gargoyle lands on the ground, its body will solidify into a gargoyle form, increasing its defense, making it immune to spells of the same level and below, and beginning to recover its health points. Initial Skill 5, Sound Suppression Barrier, multiple gargoyles can form a sound suppression barrier. The effect is the same as the sound suppression array. Initial Skill 6, Light Immunity, gargoyle's body has a unique reflective layer, sunlight and ultraviolet rays can no longer cause it any damage. Evaluation, the person who can synthesize such an epic creature is definitely a genius. After reading the information, Link was dumbfounded. Light purple, it was indeed an epic creature. This was Link's second undead creature, and also his first epic pet, and his first level 20 pet. The 6 skills he had displayed had given him an unparalleled surprise. AoE skills, crowd control skills, buff skills, passive HP recovery skills, and functional skills. A pet could take care of all these, and it was almost perfect. The system's evaluation made Link straighten his back. What was this? This was a masterpiece in the history of synthesis. After reading the gargoyle's skills, Link's scalp went numb. Take the first skill, Terrifying Scream, for example. It could deal 600 damage to enemies within 50 meters and could be used 3 times a day. In other words, it could deal 1800 damage in a row. In addition to the 200 damage from War Squall, it could be used twice a day and could deal a total of 2200 damage. This terrifying explosive power was even more terrifying than the explosive power of his nano battlesuit in Apocalypse. Most importantly, Link had only synthesized it with a sound-suppressing stone. Link still had 3 more of these stones, which meant he could create 3 more of these terrifying monsters. Just imagine the damage and the scene of 4 gargoyles releasing terrifying shriek at the same time. Link hadn't drunk any wine, but he was drunk. P.S. The first chapter of the month has arrived. Our goal is to not be broken chapter dog. Chapter 282. Give me 4 gargoyles, and I can rule the entire slums. Link had already witnessed the power of vampires. He had to thank John for the sound-suppressing stone. This scamming fellow had finally done a good thing. Gargoyle, I have a mission for you. The gargoyle knelt down on one knee respectfully, waiting for Link's order. This kind of undead bloodline creature valued their creator and the master of their bloodline very much. They strictly followed the hierarchical system, which was similar to the system of the Blood Clan. Master, please speak. Look for 3 more vampire bats in the Sand City. I think you should be able to find them easily with your ability. The gargoyles were originally vampire bats. Although they had evolved after the fusion, they still knew the habits of vampire bats like the back of their hands. During the day, the blood-sucking bats are usually hidden in caves or in the dark, so they are very difficult to find. We'll wait until night time to complete the mission for Master. Link patted the gargoyle's shoulder. It felt hard and cold. Let Jin Gang take you around the backyard for a while to familiarize you with the environment and friends. We'll start the mission at night. If you need anything, you can find me anytime as long as I'm in the backyard. Link turned to leave, but was stopped by the macaw. Wait, you still haven't told me why there was a purple glow. This thing's level is quite high, said Link, pointing at the gargoyle. It's of excellent quality, so it's surrounded by a purple halo. With that, Link slipped away before the pets could react. After a while, the angry voice of the pet came from the yard. What did he mean? What was the meaning of this? They said we were trash? Men. When they loved each other, they would call each other baby, but when their new love turned around, they would say, who's this? I don't know her. Link patted his chest and looked back at the yard from time to time. He shrugged his shoulders and said guiltily, luckily I ran fast, otherwise I would have been torn apart by them. At first, Lin Ke had thought that a superior pet was already very strong and had a lot of potential. However, after seeing an epic quality pet, he changed his mind. An epic pet, whether it was damage or ability, had a qualitative leap when compared to a specialized superior pet. To put it simply, it went from specialist to all-round. This made Link even more eager to collect the 4 gargoyles. The theoretical damage of the 4 gargoyles was enough to deal with a leader-tier boss. This gave Link the confidence to face them. In actual battle, it was impossible to deal all the damage. The leader boss was not just for show. It would not just stand there and let you hit it. However, in general, with the help of his pets, Lin Ke had the ability to kill a leader-tier boss. This was the reason why Link was able to communicate with the NPCs as equals. Late at night, when the sun set, the temperature dropped. The stone ghost statue was unsealed from its extremely hard stone form. The stones on its body made cracking sounds and gradually softened. The gargoyle stretched out its claws and carefully picked up Xiao Ziobai, who was sleeping soundly on its head, and placed it on the grass pile at the side. Her dark red eyes lost their evil and terror under the gentle action, and there was a trace of warmth in her eyes. You're leaving just like that? At the door, Jin Gang sat cross-legged on a futon with a Buddhist scripture in his hand. He asked without looking up. The gargoyle looked up at the night sky. The dark clouds had dispersed in a day, and the numerous lights formed an orange-yellow light that shrouded the top of the city, making the stars in the night sky lose their color. At the end of the month, the moon was hidden at night. The night sky was dark and deep, which was suitable for carrying out missions. It's better to do the mission early. It can be seen that Master is looking forward to synthesizing other gargoyles. Besides, it's easy to find ordinary bats, but it's hard to find vampire bats. It'll take a lot of effort. King Kong looked at the gargoyle and said, be careful. As Vajra had been studying Buddhism for a long time, he was also wearing a Buddha's shrine and sara, which nourished his body with the aura of Buddhism that only a virtuous monk had. The gargoyle, on the other hand, was a combination of a vampire bat and a sound suppression stone. The vampire bat had an evil aura, while the sound suppression stone was an extraterrestrial meteorite, so it had a neutral aura. Therefore, the gargoyle's aura was also both good and evil. The gargoyle flapped its wings and took off, quickly disappearing into the night sky. The gargoyle sniffed the air above the Kylin Hall, but there was no smell of vampire bats in the nearby air. There was not even the smell of bats. You can go to the west to search. Maybe you can find something there. At some point in time, the macaw flapped its wings and flew to a place not far from the gargoyle. Is there anything in the west? The gargoyle asked curiously. To the west of Kylin Hall is another slum area force, the Secret Alliance, the macaw said while panting. It was rumored that the core members of the Secret Alliance were all vampires. I think there will be vampire bats wherever the Blood Clan is. Upon hearing the name of the Blood Clan, the gargoyle's scarlet eyes immediately turned sharp. It involuntarily produced a subconscious reflex, wanting to annihilate the Blood Clan. "All right, I'll go take a look at the west." The gargoyle flapped its powerful wings and flew west. Before it left, it paused for a moment and said, "Also, thank you for your information." With that, he disappeared into the night sky. The macaw glided all the way to the ground and plunged into the pond prepared for the hippo in the hydraulic press. The hippo in the hydraulic press was swimming in the pond. Half of its head was exposed, and its small eyes were closed as it slept. Suddenly, there was a splash behind him, as if something had fallen into the water. The hippo's eyes opened like light bulbs, and it didn't notice anything strange. It snorted out 2 clouds of water from its nose, closed its eyes, and went back to sleep. The macaw climbed out of the water with difficulty. It was wet all over and panted by the pond like a dead dog. "Do you think it's easy for me to gain some favorability?" After all, the macaw had lived for more than 30 years. Although he was unhappy with the quality of power Link had mentioned earlier, he was still a gangster. Besides, under Link's command, one more friend was better than one more enemy. That was why the macaw had to go to great lengths to fly into the air to provide information to the gargoyles. When dawn arrived and the sky started to turn white, the gargoyle's figure welcomed the morning light and returned successfully. The first thing Link did after washing up was to go to the zoo to check on the animals. At that time, the gargoyle had already transformed into a stone statue and was resting in a dark corner. Although the gargoyle was no longer afraid of sunlight after the synthesis, it was a little tired after a night of searching for vampire bats and going to many places. On top of the gargoyle's head, Xiao Ziobai curled up its toot body and took a nap. "Should I wake the gargoyle up and listen to its report on last night's actions?" the macaw asked. Link placed a hand on the macaw's shoulder and said, "No need. Let it rest. I'll take a look at my spoils." Then, he walked into the separate room that was specially used to store birds. As soon as he entered, Link saw 3 bats hanging upside down on a tree. 2 of them had their eyes closed and were curled up in sleep. Only one was wide open, staring at Link. Link was attracted at first glance. He immediately checked the vampire bat's information. His face was first filled with shock, then it turned into wild laughter. Chapter 283 Viscount Simon. If there was a word to describe Link's current mood, it would be "the enemy has delivered himself to the door." How could there be such a good thing? Link locked the door and turned on the dim red light in the room. It was a dim light that could be used for illumination without making the vampire bats feel uncomfortable. "All right, you don't have to pretend in front of me." Link pulled a chair over and sat down with his legs crossed. There was no movement in the room. It was as if Link was a mental patient talking to himself. The 2 vampire bats hung upside down, wrapped in their sleeping bodies. They were not disturbed by Link's words at all. On the other hand, the blood-sucking bat on the far right had its eyes wide open. Its body was stiff and motionless, looking particularly abnormal and cute. Link pointed at the abnormal vampire bats and said, "I'm talking about you, big-eyed bat. Your eyes are bigger than anyone else's. Are you afraid that others won't know that you're different from the other 2? The cute big-eyed bat blinked its eyes, indicating that it didn't understand. "Do you want me to point it out before you're willing to show yourself, vampire of the Hidden Alliance?" As soon as Link finished speaking, the silver formation wall ants in his sleeves materialized into 4 whistle arrows that floated behind him. The arrows were aimed at the big-eyed bat. The big-eyed bat hanging upside down was so scared that it trembled violently. It immediately let go of the dead wood and fell down. After a puff of smoke, a man in a dark red suit appeared in front of Link, half kneeling. Even under the dim light, one could still see the man's pale face, giving off a weak and sickly feeling. "How did you find me?" the Blood Tribe cultivator asked. Originally, the Sand City's evaluation of Link had been rising day by day, and he was gradually becoming legendary. Ever since he became the Kylan Hall's Hall Master, Link rarely fought personally. Everyone was curious about his current strength. After their 3rd brother, Mr. Kong, had displayed his power in the Hidden Alliance, the Blood Clan's fear of Link had deepened. Link's hands were on the arms of his chair, and his legs were crossed. He only smiled faintly at the vampire's question, but had no intention of answering. "Didn't they say that the Blood Clan is a very cultured race? Why can't you even introduce yourself and say hello?" Link's words left the man speechless. The man got up, took a few deep breaths, and straightened his back. He gave off the feeling of a lonely noble who had no ability but adhered to the customs of the nobles. "It's a pleasure to meet you, Master Lin, Viscount Simon under Count Dracula of the Blood Clan of the Hidden Alliance. I didn't think that my first meeting with a vampire would be in a zoo," said Link, shrugging. "Tell me about the Hidden Alliance," Link said, changing the topic. "Tell me all the secrets you know." The Blood Tribe cultivator was stunned at first, but then he laughed in anger. "Clan Master Lin, you don't seem to realize that you're in the same room as me." The Blood Tribe man suddenly pounced on Link, shouting, "For Dracula!" As soon as he finished speaking, the whistle arrow turned into a round shield in front of Link, blocking the vampire who was pouncing at him. Link then kicked the vampire in the stomach, sending him flying against the wall. A muffled sound came from the wall, and the two vampire bats were awakened from their sleep. However, they didn't hear the sound after that, so they flapped their wings and wrapped themselves up before going back to sleep. The vampire fell to the ground, holding his stomach with both hands and wailing. A human figure was knocked out of the wall behind him. The figure was large and looked quite artistic. "You have to understand the situation now. You are already my prisoner." In the previous fight, Link had taken the opportunity to check Simon's information. Bloodkin Viscount, level 15 elite. This made Link's imagination run wild. If all the Viscounts were elites, then the third prince had received Count Dracula's embrace and was now a Viscount. Did that not mean that this wave of misfortune had turned into a blessing in disguise, turning from a normal NPC into an elite? Simon struggled to get up from the ground and vomited a mouthful of blood. He looked up and wanted to say something, but he found that 4 whistle arrows had already arrived in front of him, pointing at his head. Simon immediately broke out in a cold sweat. Seeing the sharp arrow right in front of him, he swallowed the words that were just about to come out of his mouth. Link's casual kick had almost knocked him out of breath. The other party did not even stand up from the chair to gather strength. With just an ordinary kick, it made Simon feel that he was not far from meeting his ancestor, Cain. "Now, tell me honestly what I'm going to ask. You're a Viscount. Although you can block part of the sunlight and onions, you can't resist the silver Holy Cross. I think you don't want to be on the Holy Cross and surrounded by onions." Link had only said this casually, but Simon's face was already filled with extreme fear. Link was very familiar with the blood race in his previous life. After all, his main profession in his previous life was pugilist, and his sub-profession was blood race. In the system of the vampires, only when one's strength reached the rank of Earl could they not be afraid of onions, sunlight, and silver. They would have the power to directly fight against the Holy Crusaders or the Church. In his previous life, there was a saying among the Blood Clan players: all those below the Earl were ants. It meant that the vampires below the rank of Earl had obvious weaknesses. Once their identities were discovered, they would be easily targeted. Or I have another way, which is to stuff you into a silver bathtub and fill it with garlic juice. That will definitely be a sour and refreshing taste. Link's ideas were all the methods used by players to deal with Blood Clan players or Blood Clan members in his previous life. They could be said to be quite cruel. Simon was dumbfounded when he heard this. He had lived for more than 70 years and had never heard of such torture. Just thinking about it made him feel an indescribable discomfort all over his body. It was as if he had blisters on his skin and was covered in pus. She staggered a few steps and fell to her knees in front of Link. "What does Hall Master Lin want to ask?" "I will tell you everything I know." Link snorted and said in a lazy tone, "Why didn't you do this earlier? Why did you have to suffer physical pain for nothing?" Link now knew about the secret alliance. Part of it was from Mina, and the other part was from his third brother, Mr. Kong, using the spy rat. How long has your hidden alliance been in shadow? The information about the secret alliance's power distribution and number of people was recorded in detail in the intelligence sent by Mr. Kong. Link was more interested in knowing some secrets about the secret alliance. The supreme leader of the secret alliance was Count Dracula. The status of a viscount was equivalent to the deacons or core backbone of other gangs, and he was considered a high-level member of the organization. This Viscount Simon in front of him had quite a high status in the hidden alliance, so he should know some secrets. Simon was clearly taken aback. He'd already prepared a draft in his mind, but Link didn't ask about the distribution of the hidden alliance's members. Instead, he'd asked about their history and time, catching him off guard. In his 70 years of life, this was the first time he had met someone who didn't play by the rules. We were already living in the Sand City in the old era, ah. Chapter 284 Leniency to those who confess, severity to those who resist. The people of the old era believed in science. They had always thought that it was fabricated in the novels of the vampires. We also borrowed this idea of theirs to hide perfectly in the city and mind our own business. 42 years ago, on the Day of Reckoning, the two superpowers pressed the red button, and the entire planet was reduced to a wasteland in a nuclear explosion and dark clouds. Normal humans can't withstand the radiation and nuclear dust, and a large number of them died. The small number of humans who escaped to the underground shelter formed the main body. Due to the special recovery abilities of us vampires, the nuclear dust is not that fatal to us. After the Day of Reckoning, various hidden ancient forces on Wasteland Planet came to the front from behind the scenes, as well as the newly born mutants. While the war brought pain to the world, it also pressed a new evolution button. At that time, the Cross Army, the Machinery Faith, the Wasteland Gang, the Brotherhood, and various other organizations and forces emerged one after another. Some of us in the Blood Clan also suggested that we should step out of seclusion, but the final voting result was still hidden. The princes and elders believe that once the Blood Clan appears, they will become the primary target of the Cross Army and the sect. Moreover, the Blood Clan's own strength is not enough to guarantee that they can fight against many forces. Link listened patiently. In his previous life, his sub-profession, Bloodling, had been activated at the Han family in Dragon City. That was why Link knew the Blood Clan system in Dragon City like the back of his hand. However, he knew very little about the Blood Clan in the Sand Capital. So, Dracula is the only Blood Clan in the Sand City? Are you all neutral with the Han family and Xiao family of Dragon City? Simon opened his mouth wide and muttered, how do you know the secret of our Blood Clan? In the Secret Alliance, Simon was not considered a senior. There were also a few Viscounts who were older than him, and together they formed the core council of the Secret Alliance. Simon didn't know about the Han family and the Xiao family in Dragon City. It was only during the Count's Elder meeting that he first heard that the Secret Alliance had two other allied families in Dragon City. They were the Han family and Xiao family that Link had mentioned. It was said that the three families planned to hold a meeting in 3 months, and the location was set to be in Dragon City. Seeing Simon's expression, Link knew the answer. It seems like the Secret Alliance is a neutral party. In Simon's heart, Link was even more mysterious and powerful. At that moment, he could not help but think of his superior Count Dracula, who was also a representative of power and mystery. Both of them had a daunting aura. You can continue. Link gestured for Simon to continue. He wanted to know more about the Hidden Alliance. Simon was stunned. Link even knew their top secret. What else could he say? A moment later, Simon finally understood. Link must have known all the secrets of the Hidden Alliance. He was asking him to see if he was telling the truth. Gulp. Simon swallowed his saliva and was at war with himself. If Link could tell that he was lying, he would be dead for sure. Every sentence that followed was like walking on a tightrope. If he was not careful, he would lose his life. No, according to what Link had just said, it would be a torture worse than losing his life. Where should I start? Simon was out of his wits and stuttered. He had lived for 70 years and was a noble and gentlemanly vampire in front of others, but at this moment, he was nervous, anxious, and afraid. All kinds of emotions were mixed together in his head, and he was completely like a wooden stake. Let's start with the structure of the Hidden Alliance. Simon did not think about it at the moment. He answered subconsciously and mechanically. Originally, there were several bloodline families in Chitu, but after the war, vendetta, and fights, the counts of the other bloodlines all fell, and only our Dracula bloodline managed to survive until the Day of Reckoning. There are also several other branches left in the secret alliance, the highest being only a viscount. Although they belong to the core family members, they know that their power is weak, so they have completely surrendered and followed the mainstream during the voting. Tell me about Count Dracula's strength. Simon's eyes trembled, and he looked at Link with some respect. The Earl hasn't fought for decades. Before that, his strength was unfathomable. In the early days of the reconstruction of Shandu, he had the experience of leading the Blood Clan to fight for territory. At that time, he killed his way into the enemy's formation alone and completely disrupted the enemy's formation of nearly 100 people. He was like the blood ancestor who had descended to the mortal world. According to Simon's description, Link estimated that Count Dracula was a level 30 elite. The leaders of the major forces in the slums would not have much of a difference in level. The boss of the Green Dragon was level 27 plus, elite, and Dracula was an old turtle who had lived for more than 100 years. It would not be too different to give him a level 30 plus, elite, evaluation. In addition, the vampire count's skills were quite disgusting. They had blood recovery, control, group damage, and burst, so it wasn't a big problem for him to fight against 100 enemies. How did you get here? Link asked. The gargoyles had gone out to look for vampire bats. They didn't expect a viscount to turn into a vampire bat and mix in with them, trying to get away with it. He actually succeeded. If it weren't for the fact that Link wanted to synthesize these bats, raising them in the backyard would really be a disgrace. I didn't know this gargoyle was from the Kylan Hall, but when I came out of the building at night, I saw a gargoyle-like creature in the sky. You know, gargoyles are an extremely rare and magical creature for the Blood Clan. If I can tame it, it will definitely improve the Blood Clan greatly. So I turned into a vampire bat and followed them. In the end, I was discovered by the gargoyles and brought back. This was also what Simon couldn't figure out the most. After the gargoyles caught him, they returned to the Kylan Hall. When Simon arrived at the Kylan Hall, he was completely stunned. He had never thought that the gargoyle, which should only be possessed by a high-class Blood Clan bloodline, would actually appear in the Kylan Hall. What surprised him was that when the gargoyle returned to the backyard of the Kylan Hall, it handed the vampire bat to a gorilla made of metal. In the zoo, Simon saw many creatures he had never seen before. These creatures didn't look native, but more like they were created by some means. She thought about the rumors that Link seemed to have some unique ability that allowed wild beasts to evolve. Simon was even more certain that the rumor was true. Link's expression remained calm. He now believed the reason for Simon's capture. After all, he was a vampire in his 70s. He might not be strong, but his age was real. He would be able to find out if he was lying after he went out and matched his statements with the gargoyles. There was no need to lie about this. At that moment, Link felt as if there were 8 bright words behind him: leniency to those who confess, severity to those who resist. Chapter 285: A Blood Contract. Link sized up Simon with interest, a smirk on his face. Simon was a little familiar with this kind of smirk. Men and women who entered the hotel hand in hand at night usually had this kind of unpredictable smile on their faces, which sent chills down one's spine. So, you've seen everything in the backyard, right? Simon felt as if he had fallen into an ice cave. He first nodded, but then shook his head violently. No, I didn't see anything. I don't know anything, Ying Luo. As expected, the situation in the backyard of Kailan Hall was Link's trump card and secret. Now that all his secrets had been seen, Simon knew that if he admitted to it, he would be killed to keep his mouth shut. You've lived for 70 years. Do you think I'll believe your one-sided story? Link chuckled. The Viscount in front of him had really forgotten about the elegance of the Blood clan. Simon's brain was as white as a sheet. Even under the dark red light, his pale face looked even more bloodless. Did you tell anyone about you following the gargoyles out? Simon shook his head mechanically. Gargoyles are magical creatures that even a prince might not have. Why would I tell others about such a good thing? It was as if a ton of weight had been placed on Simon's shoulders. His straight back was now completely deflated, and he almost knelt down in front of Link. Simon knew that he had no chance of living, so he simply stopped struggling. He was a Viscount of an opposing force. If he could be killed and his head was sent back, it would definitely affect the morale of the secret alliance. On top of that, she had seen through Link's secret trump card. If it were her, she would also kill him without hesitation. Link noticed the change in Simon's mood. He had still held on to a glimmer of hope before, but after he pointed out the secret he had seen, Simon quickly calmed down and realized that he was dead for sure. He decided not to struggle. You still want to live? If it had been a minute ago, Simon would have knelt down and kowtowed to thank him, but now he knew what he was doing. As the backbone of the enemy faction, how could he survive after seeing the other party's trump card? He was only asking this to humiliate her again. Humph! Simon snorted and asked, I've seen all of your cards. If you let me go, the secret alliance will know how to deal with you. In this situation, you still asked me if I wanted to live. I think it's unnecessary. If you want to humiliate a vampire, then I have to say it. You're going to be disappointed. Link took a deep breath and stood up from his chair. He looked down at Simon and said, That's right, you're from the secret alliance. Letting you go is like letting a tiger return to the mountain. I, Link, have never taken a wrong step to become a hall leader from a slave. I won't make the wrong move today. Whoosh! Link waved his wrist, and the arrow flew back into his sleeve. As long as you're willing to sign a blood contract, I'll let you live. Simon's mouth was wide open as he stared at Link in shock. Under the dim red light, Link's face could only be seen as a black shadow. This black figure was tall, mysterious, omniscient, and had a suffocating pressure. Link even knew about the blood contract. It seemed that there were no secrets in the Blood clan to him. A blood contract was the strongest type of contract in the Blood clan, apart from the initial bloodline. Both parties had to hold the contract tightly and use the vampire's secret technique to activate the contract. Once the contract was completed, it would have an unbreakable effect. If the contractor violated the contract, they would trigger the bloodline curse and die from boiling blood. The hierarchy of the blood race was strict and could not be crossed. However, the blood contract was more effective than the bloodline, and it would take effect immediately if violated. Choose death or embrace a new life. It's all in your hands. Link's words were like magic, with a strong bewitching effect. His mood went from a glimmer of hope to being destroyed, and then to being reignited with hope. Simon's mood was like a roller coaster, up and down, without any chance to catch his breath. What's the content of a blood contract? Simon asked with a wary expression. If the content was an impossible mission like assassinating Count Dracula or subverting the secret alliance, Simon would rather die. Pledge your loyalty to me. The short 3 words were like a sledgehammer that struck Simon's heart. If she chose to be loyal to Link, she could live on. However, from now on, he would be completely separated from the secret alliance and would be regarded as a traitor by the vampires. Link had already given Simon his choice. It was all up to Simon to decide which path he would take. Should he continue to live, or should he choose to sacrifice himself for the family? A moment later, Simon extended his hand and stopped in front of Link. He made his choice. Link also reached out and shook Simon's hand. Kane's blood, Viscount Simon. I hereby make a blood contract and pledge my loyalty to Link. If I violate it, I will be punished by the heavens. Simon, with the glorious Kane bloodline, I, Link, swear an oath to you and accept your allegiance. A dark blood vessel appeared on each of their hands, connecting them together. The blood contract was formed. At the same time, Link received a system notification. Simon LV15+, Elite, swears allegiance to you. Simon becomes your servant. Simon was still in shock. During the blood contract, Link had used the Blood Clan's secret language to form the contract without any guidance. The secret language was one of the ancient languages of the Blood Clan. Many ancient documents, contracts, and profound Blood Clan skills were written in secret language. Only the true core members and the old elders of the Blood Clan could understand the secret language. Simon couldn't sense any Blood Clan aura from Link, but he knew the core secrets of the Blood Clan. Other than shock, Simon was still shocked. He recalled that Count Dracula had wanted to defeat Link and destroy Kylan Hall's industries during the meeting. Now, it seemed like all that had been a joke and a pipe dream. In Simon's eyes, the mysterious Blood Clan had no secrets in Link's eyes. Master. Simon stuck one hand to his trouser leg and sleeve while the other hand rested on his heart. He bowed respectfully at a 90-degree angle. This was the most honorable benefit of the Blood Clan, and it represented complete submission. Since you've already surrendered, I'll give you a mission now. Return to the Hidden Alliance and pretend that nothing has happened. Upon hearing this order, Simon's first reaction was to refuse, but then his heart felt as if it was being squeezed by something invisible, and he found it difficult to breathe. The effects of the blood contract had already begun. Simon pressed his heart with one hand and asked with difficulty, "If you want me to go back, isn't that just sending me to my death? You'll be more useful if you stay in the Hidden Alliance, and you don't have to worry about your safety. I'll arrange for someone to pick you up." Hey? Simon was stunned. Master actually planted someone in the Hidden Alliance? Link chuckled and kept her in suspense. "You'll know when the time comes. He'll take the initiative to find you." At this moment, in Simon's eyes, Link was already a powerful existence. It was simply unbelievable to be able to plant someone in the Secret Alliance. Chapter 286 The Man Who Stands Above the Blood Clan. Simon was dumbfounded. At this moment, it would not be an exaggeration to describe Link as a powerful figure. To be able to send someone to the Hidden Alliance as a spy, Simon could not figure out how this was done no matter how hard he racked his brains. If he was just an ordinary spy, he would not have known so many secrets. If he was a core spy, that was even more impossible. The core members of the Secret Alliance had to go through Count Dracula's embrace and officially become controlled blood breeds, and be completely loyal to Dracula before they could be considered to be part of the core circle. The embrace could be said to be the most important inheritance method for the Blood Clan, so it had an extremely strong and firm contractual power. It wasn't just the first generation that was affected, but every generation. The first embrace required the caster to absorb all of the target's blood into their body before injecting their own blood to complete the blood replacement. From another perspective, humans reproduced through sex, while vampires reproduced through the embrace. The contract was passed down from generation to generation. This unbreakable contract had been in progress for thousands of years, and no one had ever heard of anyone who could break the bloodline bond. However, Link's words were all top secrets of the Secret Alliance. He must have sent a spy to inform them. This was why Simon was so surprised. No matter how hard he racked his brains, he couldn't figure out how Link had gotten the spy to bypass the bloodline's influence. Link sized Simon up. In his opinion, a blood contract wasn't enough. This kind of unexpected surprise wouldn't happen even in a few hundred years. Since it happened, he had to make sure nothing went wrong. Previously, when he had analyzed the situation of the three undercover agents, he had concluded that Fu and Alan could both show their skills. Only the third brother, Mr. Kong, did not have any obvious advantages even though he had become a level 15 elite. It was still quite difficult for him to develop to the core level where he had more power. Now, with Simon's support and cover, the whole process would be much easier. You can't just go back like this. You may have signed a blood contract, but if Dracula uses his will to control you, you will not be able to go against it. Please wait here for a moment. Link then opened the door and shouted, "Old Jin, help me get the crystal bottle from my room." Simon didn't know what Link was up to, but his instincts told him that it wasn't something good. "Master, what are you doing?" Simon couldn't help but ask. He was so nervous that he even forgot the effects of the piercing light that shone in when he opened the door on his body. Link closed the door again and turned around to reveal a meaningful smile. "You'll find out later." Not long after, the macaw returned with the crystal bottle. Under the dark red light, the crystal bottle flickered with a soft, crystal-like luster, as if it wanted to dispel the gloominess. It naturally emitted a light that made people feel comfortable. Simon looked at the shining crystal bottle in a daze. He never thought that a bottle of water could glow. Link carefully poured a few milliliters into the small cup and muttered, "You're really lucky. Even my most loyal subordinates rarely get this kind of treatment." What's this?" Simon could not help but ask. This seemingly harmless and even attractive water and light made him even more nervous. Based on Simon's 70 years of experience, the more beautiful an object was, the more dangerous it was. "It's a good thing that's useful to you, Ying Luo." The Moonwell water was extremely precious. As an elder, he would receive 300 milliliters every season. For the synthesis this time, Link had put in a lot of effort and poured out 50 milliliters. Simon gradually recovered from his shock. Looking at the moon-like well water that was as bright as the stars, he felt more and more familiar with it. Water was common, but water that glowed was rare, not to mention light that made the vampires feel comfortable. Soon, Simon thought of a rumor from many years ago and couldn't help but ask, "Boss, is this the water from the Moonwell of the Moon Shadow Council? The legendary Moonwell water that can regrow flesh and bring the dead back to life?" "I didn't think you'd be so knowledgeable," said Link with a smile. "You even know about the Moonwell water." Link shook the 50 ml of Moonwell water Indiana the test tube and sighed. "That's why I say you're lucky. You've just pledged your allegiance to me and you already have such a good thing." Closing the crystal bottle, Link walked up to Simon with the fluorescent test tube. "Moonwell water." Simon swallowed. "Rumor has it that only the elders of the Moon Shadow Council can enjoy it." "Boss, you have such a big bottle of cicadas?" Simon said unconsciously and immediately covered his mouth with his hand, his eyes filled with fear. What he had just said was all an unconscious action, but he immediately reacted after saying it. The more he knew, the worse he would die. However, Link ignored Simon's act of surprise. Although the blood contract is strong, it's still inferior to bloodline power in terms of priority. In order to ensure that you won't be exposed in front of Dracula, I have to find a way to remove the bloodline restriction Dracula placed on you. Link's words were easy to say, but they were deafening to Simon. The power of the blood race's bloodline had been passed down for generations, and no one had ever heard of anyone being able to break through this bloodline restriction. Although the Moonwell water's healing effects were very strong and could be considered a rare treasure, the power inheritance of the blood clan all came from blood. The continuation of the blood clan's system also came from blood. Blood was both the core and the medium. Simon could proudly say that no one knew blood better than the vampires. There was no other race that could use blood better than the blood race. But now, Link was saying that he could remove Count Dracula's bloodline restriction. To Simon, this was no different from changing the natural laws of the world, such as the sun rising in the east and setting in the west. It was a complete fantasy. Link put his hand on Simon's shoulder and entered the synthesis interface. The Moonwell water's strong healing properties were extremely compatible with the Blood clan. The compatibility rate between the two was as high as 120%. The third brother, Mr. Kong, was first synthesized and then transformed into a vampire by Count Dracula's embrace. Therefore, Simon could be considered Link's first pure-born Blood clan servant. With such a Blood clan member participating in the synthesis, it was only natural that he would need better materials. Link's insectoid synthesis was far more powerful than the Blood clan's. He could easily break Count Dracula's control over Simon and break through the barriers of his potential. Are you ready? Ah! Are you ready to break free from Dracula's control? Simon's face was blank, like a silly roe deer walking into a trap. All right, I won't ask you any more. Link decisively chose to synthesize it. The Moonwell water in the test tube was quickly absorbed by his palm. Immediately after, a blood cocoon covered his other hand and quickly wrapped around Simon. The blood cocoon wrapped around Simon's head. The last thing Link saw before it closed was Simon's terrified eyes. 287 A new direction for security development. The 5 hours of incubation time passed in a flash. After lunch, Link returned to the room where Simon was being held. Link opened the door and entered the room. The scorching noon sun and temperature poured in through the door. The blinding light hit Simon's face, and his first reaction was to cover his eyes. A Blood clan member with the strength of a Viscount did not have the ability to resist sunlight. If one was hit by the midday sun, their skin would be severely burned, and even their strength would be reduced to a certain extent. Simon's face was deathly pale, and he was already prepared to feel pain all over his body. However, when the sunlight hit the skin on his arm, there was only a slight tingling sensation. And with a flowing chill, the last bit of pain disappeared. The poisonous sunlight did not cause any harm to Simon. Simon put down his arm and looked at it. His skin was as white as new, without any burn marks. The next second, a shadow stood at the door. Under the light, only the outline could be seen, not the face. However, Simon had a strong feeling that this person was Link. So you've already come out of the blood cocoon. How do you feel? Simon didn't know how to describe his current feeling. He was still a little dizzy. He remembered that he had been surrounded by countless blood cocoons before he lost consciousness. After waking up and breaking out of the blood cocoon, the door opened again before Simon could react to what he had experienced. Simon was surprised to find that he was no longer afraid of the sun. How long have I been unconscious? Simon's first question was not about ability, but time. She had not returned from tracking the gargoyle for the entire night. Now that she had signed the blood contract with Link and had been unconscious in a strange way, her disappearance would easily arouse the suspicion of the Hidden Alliance. When he returned to the Hidden Alliance and was questioned, he would be easily exposed no matter what Simon said. On the one hand, the Dracula bloodline's suppression, and on the other hand, the blood contract he had signed with Link would make things difficult for him. 5 hours. You don't have to worry about the problem that you're thinking about. Now that the Dracula bloodline's suppression on you has disappeared, I've fused the power of the Moonwell water into your body. You're not afraid of sunlight now, and your recovery speed is faster than the other Blood clan members. Simon felt another power flowing in his body. It was this power that had protected him from the sun's burning. At the same time, the restraint of the Blood clan's bloodline disappeared. Simon clearly felt the power suppressing him disappear, and his bloodline power was completely released. In the future, he could even be promoted to an earl. Are these Kazayas real? Simon was dumbfounded and stared at Link in shock. You can go back now. Later, I'll get the spy to contact you. Link then left, satisfied. After the synthesis, the Dracula's power in Simon's body had lost its leading role. The Zergs were domineering and terrifying. To be honest, the blood restriction of the bloodlings was nothing to the Zergs in the universe. While Simon was still in a daze, Link had already read his information. The current Simon was simply a piece of meat. He also had great potential. In Link's eyes, he could challenge Dracula's status in the future. The blood race was one of the few races that could be found all over the wasteland planet. Their strict status system gave Link an opportunity. Link's target wasn't just the Sand City. As long as he pushed Simon up, he would be the mastermind behind the secret alliance. In the future, he could even control all the blood breeds in the Freedom Federation through Simon. Link wasn't the kind of person who would keep everything to himself. After looking through Simon's information, he still had to show it to the readers. Monster attributes. Name, Simon. Grade, dark blue. Race, blood clan. Attribute, blood. Level, 15+, elite. Initial skill 1, blood red pool level 2, Simon has absorbed the essence of the moon well. At night, he can turn his body into a pool of blood with a diameter of 4 meters. He will gain a temporary acceleration effect and cannot be selected. He will also cause speed reduction and 150 points of damage to enemies within the blood pool's range. This can only be used once a day. Initial skill 2, rapid recovery level 2, Simon's accumulated moonlight has healing effects for every 1 ml of the healing effect, 2 HP will be recovered. The moonlight capacity is 200 points. Initial skill 3, blood plague LV2, Simon's blood flows backwards, turning the healing blood into extremely toxic damage, 0.5 damage per 1 ml of blood. The amount of blood consumed cannot exceed the maximum health points of the current user. Description: the first vampire in history to possess the dual abilities of moon and blood. It is destined to be extraordinary. If such a potential vampire returned to the Hidden Alliance and worked with his third brother, Mr. Kong, he would definitely be able to do well with Dracula. Link was looking forward to seeing Dracula's shocked expression when he found out that his right-hand man was a spy. Simon came out of his room and looked around. He realized that Link had indeed left. There were no restrictions in the surroundings, and there were no nets in the sky. It seemed that he was really free. Simon raised his head to look at the glaring sun. In the past, the sun was the second most terrifying thing in his life after the Dracula. He had never thought that one day he would be able to stand under the most vicious sunlight and look directly at the sun. The noon sun was bright and vicious, and it was the time when the light was the strongest. However, Simon looked up and stared at the sun. At first, his eyes felt uncomfortable, but a cool breeze suddenly flowed into his eyes, and he no longer felt uncomfortable when he looked at the sun. To Simon, this experience was like a dream. Even if the sun had little effect on vampires above the Count rank, it was not to the point where they could stand under the sun and look directly at it. Usually, this kind of bloodling would be called second fool. Whoosh! Black smoke rose from Simon's body, and then he turned into a blood-sucking bat and fled from the Kylan Hall. Link watched the vampire bats fly away from the window in his study. He smiled. A butterfly had flown away, and it would soon set off a storm in the Hidden Alliance. Not long after Simon left, Link's phone rang. "Hello, boss. I'm Penny. I have something to discuss with you." "Ha, this guy is quite trendy." The house he was living in was just next door, but instead of coming over, he directly called. At this moment, the penguin, Penny, was lying on a chair with a red scarf around its neck, black sunglasses and a mobile phone in one hand. According to the reports of the three deacons, many people have gone to the breeding factory to find trouble, but they were basically stopped by the security company. "Sanbeo boss, can you give me a weakened civilian version of the three treasures of security? I want to promote this thing to the whole of Shitasuanji." Link immediately understood. Pony had just monopolized the hamster pet, and now he was targeting the three treasures of security. Link pondered for a moment. He thought about how vines, killer bees, and black widows were all over the entire Sand City. In the future, when he became enemies with Alongso or Moros, he could raise his arm and call for all the pets' powers together. That scene was indescribable. "No problem, we'll go solo." Chapter 288 Pre-sales start. Dog feed, meat grinder, did you guys get a spot? Win's shout echoed in the club. At this moment, in the Miracle Guild's club, the 13 core members were all focused on sitting in front of their computers, as if they were facing a great enemy. Their faces were either filled with regret or joy. Brother Feng, I got it. I got one. Gozheng King took off his headphones excitedly and jumped up from his gaming chair. Brother Feng, I also got one. Another core member shouted in excitement. The others leaned back in their gaming chairs listlessly, pouting unhappily. The pirate ship meat grinder, everyone is using the club's internet and the computers are the same. Why can't you two get it? That must be because I have a good character. Gozheng King placed his hands on his hips and bragged for a while. These words immediately aroused the dissatisfaction of the others. They stood behind Gozheng King in unison and said, "What did you just say? Can you repeat it?" King Gozheng immediately laughed and admitted defeat, avoiding the whipping and meat. Wind crossed his hands in front of his chest and was infected by the happy atmosphere of the team. He laughed, "It's not bad. On the first day of the open beta, our guild managed to get 2 virtual cabins. In order to test the load capacity of the website, the official website only opened up 3,000 devices in the Asian region. When it came to probability, Dog Feed King felt that it could do it again. It immediately bared its big, white teeth and said, 1 in 3,000. Oh, how lonely Woody is." However, before he could finish his words, the pirate ship's meat grinder covered his mouth and gave him a beating. Zui Feng laughed and continued, "This game is different from the games we've played before. It's the world's first VR gaming pod game, so after winning the game pod, it has to be delivered and installed. The cost and time required to log into the game are both higher. That was why the game company started selling the game pods a month after the game was released to distribute the game. Otherwise, the official website would crash if we wait until the public beta to release all the sales." The pirate ship's meat grinder pushed up his black glasses, and 2 rays of light flashed through the lenses. This is the cleverness of the official website. First, they split the goods into Asia, America, Europe, Africa, and Oceania. Then, they would open pre-orders 30 days in advance. Whether it was player registration or real-life express delivery, there was a huge buffer. The goal isn't just to let the game start smoothly, it also contains the game company's ambition to let more players enter the game as soon as possible and start their journey. Zui Feng patted his brother's shoulder and comforted him, "It's fine. This is only the first day of pre-sale. The quantity released is relatively small, so it's normal that we can't get it. After that, the number of orders will increase every day. We just have to grab them later." Win said to Tianxinling, who was in charge of the club's logistics, "Tianxin, is the second floor's renovation done?" "Yes." Tianxinling nodded, "The inspection has been completed. When the new gaming cabins arrive, we can install them on the second floor. The second floor can now accommodate a total of 85 game pods, including 3 single rooms, 5 two-person rooms, and 10 three-person rooms. Since Fate was the first immersive game on the Blue Planet, it had high requirements for the club's environment. The layout of the computers in the past had to be changed. Therefore, when the game was in the middle of production, Wind Chasing sensed that this game would become a popular mainstream game in the future, so he began to find ways to transform the computer room on the second floor. Wind Chasing Wolf took out his phone and looked at the time. Then he continued to order, "Gozheng, Old Li, when your game cabins arrive, go directly to the second floor to choose a seat. Other than the 3 single rooms, you can choose any of the other seats." Gozheng King rubbed his hands and was secretly delighted. Since Brother Feng has spoken, then we'll be impolite to refuse. However, the careful Tianxinling saw Win's actions and asked curiously, "Brother Feng, you've been looking at your phone. Is there something wrong?" After being reminded by Tianxinling, the others also reacted. It seemed that Wind-Chasing Wolf had been looking at the time since the beginning. At this moment, Wind-Chasing Wolf's phone rang. Zui Feng jumped down from the table and walked towards the door, saying, "Next, I'll introduce you to an important guest. He's the new investor of Miracle Guild, Yingying." As the door opened, a mature middle-aged man in a suit walked in with a smile, followed by two secretaries. "Let me introduce myself. I'm the owner of Red Horse Food Co., Limited, Qian Feng. You can also call me by another name, Thief Liang Ren." The core members of Miracle were all dumbfounded. They had not expected the boss of a listed company to come to their club in person. At this moment, all over the Blue Planet world, there were players who were happy and upset because they had managed to get a game cabin or because they had failed to get one. In the 10 days after the closed beta ended, the closed beta players were interviewed by many media outlets. Although the closed beta players had signed a confidentiality agreement and couldn't reveal the game's contents, these players were all long-standing players. They could still tell the good and bad of a game, so they talked about it a lot. To sum it up, this game would cause a revolution on the Blue Planet, and Fate was a fun and hardcore game. It was a reality that none of the players had ever experienced. The words of these closed beta players were like a feather gently rubbing against one's heart, provoking one to no end. However, when terms like first virtual gaming cabin, second world, hardcore, rich and colorful, and vast universe were put together, it was hard not to attract the players' interest. The game company also used this pre-sale to sort out the next unsealing process, which made the players look forward to it. The pre-sales would last for 30 days, so that all players who wanted to play Fate as soon as possible could get their own game pods. At the same time, starting from the 15th day, the ban on one novice planet would be lifted every day for 3 days. After that were the 4 major super systems. One system would be revealed every day for 4 days. 3 days before the official open beta, the game would officially release a promotional video, one a day. In short, regardless of whether the players had managed to grab the game cabin or not, after logging into the official website of each continent, they were all attracted by the full arrangement and unlocking content. This kind of toothpaste-like marketing tactic not only did not make the players unhappy, but it also gave everyone a feeling of anticipation for the next day. At this time, with the purchase of a total of 12,000 game pods on the first day, Fate became popular even before it started. Whether it was on Taiba, forums, Weibo's hot searches, or short video, Fate was everywhere. Even some parents who did not usually play games had their eyes lit up when they saw the words time flow rate 1:3 in the advertisement. If a child were to study in Fate, wouldn't one day be equivalent to 3 days of strength? Chapter 289 Let the whole of Shandu be under my influence. While the players on the Blue Planet were fighting for the game cabins, Link had already begun working on the plan proposed by Penny the Penguin. The Penguin's suggestion opened a new door for Link. Anyway, now that the fame of Kylan Hall's pets had spread, he might as well carry forward this area. The 3 treasures of security was extremely high-end and could be considered a military version. In that case, Link could definitely develop a lower-end civilian version. With Penny the Penguin as the managing director of the Lin Group, Link didn't have to worry about the company's strategy. The 5 passive skills of the Penguin, Penny, were all business-related. Looking at the skill names, Smell, Copy, Annex, Public Opinion, and Monopoly, each of them was extremely domineering, fully showing Penny's extremely aggressive investment style. With the experience of synthesizing the military version, Lin K quickly found the synthesized biological material for civilian use. Ordinary wasps, vines, and round spiders. The poison was less lethal, but it restricted the user's mobility. Link finished the small synthesis in no time. And compared to large animals, small insects reproduced faster and stronger. They were not as worrying as the guys in the zoo. The 3 treasures of security were sold in sets. For a family with a small living area, it was completely useless. Therefore, the target customers were also quite clear. The uptown's influential families' mansions, as well as some factories and enterprises that needed security. This kind of infiltration was extremely gentle and would not cause any resistance. Link had taken over the slums with his absolute rule and then controlled the uptown in biological form. This was equivalent to taking over the entire Sand City. Link also gave instructions to the synthesized insects. They were to form a group of 100 wasps, 10 spiders, and an ornamental vine. Because of Penny the Penguin's plan, Link decided to make a big move. On the basis of the civilian version, a batch of natural versions had been modified. Since I want to control the entire Shandu, I might as well replace the creatures in nature. By then, all the insects in the entire Shandu will be my army. With a single thought, I can attack cities and strongholds with indomitable will. The scale of these insects will be greater than an entire army. Link's idea of replacing the creatures in the natural world was getting bigger and bigger. Human activities in the Sand City were complicated, so the diversity of organisms in the city was not high. Most of them were insects, followed by rodent-like rats and some birds. Link had templates of these creatures in his backyard, so it was easy to interact with them. The natural world version didn't require any powerful abilities, as long as they were obedient. Hence, when Link synthesized, he only modified the creature's abilities and only slightly strengthened them. After the synthesis, Link would release these wild birds and insects and let them mate with their own kind in the Sand City. Then, he would expand the population with the powerful genetic characteristics of the insect race. Link looked at the newspaper. In just a few days, the headlines had changed from Pet Hamster the Demon Who Spreads the Black Death. It became Pet Hamster, the new symbol of status for Uptown's dignitaries. The pet hamsters were no longer sold publicly, but were sold through the weekly auction of the Fragrant Pig Banquet. This model led to another interesting thing. That was, in order to get a pet hamster to put up a noble's face, some rich and powerful people were forced to participate in the auction, causing the number of people participating in the auction to increase greatly in the past week. When they arrived at the auction, the rich and powerful were embarrassed to say that they were here to put on a show for their pet hamster, especially when they were surrounded by Uptown and many old acquaintances. If they didn't bid once, it would be easy for people to think that they were here for the hamster, and they would be at a disadvantage. As a result, these dignitaries, who were just putting up a front, were forced to bid again. Because of the emergence of such a group of aristocrats who raised the price, this week's Fragrant Pig Banquet broke the previous highest price of 100,000 and reached a new high of 130,000. Link looked at the report that Penny the Penguin had submitted last night. Even the income of this week's pig banquet had increased by more than 100,000. In the morning, he had exposed the vampire Simon's transformation into a vampire bat, then persuaded and lured him to become his subordinate, signed a blood contract, and transformed him. In the afternoon, he was synthesizing the civilian and natural versions of creatures. As a result, he had only finished reading the newspaper and documents in the morning by lunchtime. After dinner, before Penny the Penguin's regular meeting, Link called it to his study. "I've already arranged the ideas you mentioned. I've set every 100 wasps, 10 spiders, and 1 vine as a unit. I'll leave the rest of the promotion to you." The penguin, Pony, extended its wings and patted its little belly with a confident look. "Don't worry, boss. Leave this to me. I won't let you down." Just as Penny the Penguin was controlling the 3 deacons in the backyard to carry out the plan, the news of a mysterious manager in the inner yard of Kylan Hall, whom he had never met, spread like wildfire. At first, the 3 deacons would occasionally mention the name of the supervisor. Then, someone analyzed the business decisions of Kylan Hall during this period and found that they all had a strong personal style. It was completely different from the Kylan Hall's behavior and strategy in the past. One must know that Kylan Hall was currently the most popular force in Sand City. Every day, there were many analysts analyzing the deeper meaning behind the Kylan Hall's actions. However, since the appearance of this manager, the Kylan Hall began to become domineering. They used their own monopoly advantage to quickly expand their influence and raise the influence and demand of the Fragrant Pig banquet to the maximum. The rapid change in style showed that the business decisions behind Kylan Hall had indeed changed hands. However, this director was extremely mysterious and had never appeared in public. The other organizations only had the word director in their records. As for the height and appearance of this supervisor, he had no idea. This meant that even if the supervisor was standing in front of them, they wouldn't be able to recognize him. This was unacceptable to the forces that were used to controlling information. Therefore, a plan to expose the director of the Kylan Hall was launched. The three hostile forces in the slums took the lead, followed by the noble forces in the uptown. Even Moros became interested in this director who had a similar business style to him. He sent one of the four heavenly kings, Tai of the East District, to investigate the matter. That night, Link found out about this from the spy rat. Since the enemies had made their moves, it was time for him to receive them. However, Link never liked to be passive. This time, he was going to take the initiative and make all the forces that were against him become his stepping stones. Hey, Nicole, are you interested in doing a late-night live broadcast at Kylan Hall? Chapter 290. It can be played like this? After washing up, Nicole had just changed into her sexy muslin pajamas when the mobile phone at the head of the bed suddenly rang. Seeing the name on the display, Nicole immediately picked up the phone. Hello, Hall Master Lin. Why are you calling so late at night? Nicole, are you interested in doing a late-night live broadcast at Kylan Hall now? Link's words seemed to have some sort of magic to them and instantly made Nicole fall into a trance. Nicole knitted her brows. What would the live broadcast at Kylan Hall be about? Though Nicole did not understand, she knew that Link would not speak without thinking. I don't quite understand Kylan Hall's late-night live broadcast. I hope Hall Master Lin can explain. Link didn't beat around the bush and said, I have information that people from other forces will sneak into the backyard of Kylan Hall tonight. I've invited you here to do a live broadcast. After hearing this, Nicole could not help but gasp. When the other forces infiltrated the Kylan Hall, Link's first thought was to broadcast it live and not resist. There must be danger, right? Nicole could not help but ask. In Nicole's impression, the fights between gangs in the slums had always been bloody. In the past, when there were many conflicts between gangs, there would be daily conflicts between gangs and situations of shooting and killing people. It would also evolve into large-scale gunfights. All of you stay in the underground monitoring room and do a live broadcast through the closed-circuit surveillance. There won't be any danger. Besides, I don't care about these intruders. Today's live stream is mainly for security promotion. Nicole smiled and said, it is indeed refreshing to discuss matters with Hall Master Lin. This idea is really unexpected. In the past, gang fights were all private. No one had ever put such fights on the table, let alone announced through the power of live media. I believe today's late-night broadcast will definitely attract a lot of attention. Tomorrow, the whole of Shandu will be talking about this. Nicole had already smelled the scent of heavy news. The cruel struggle between the gangs was being broadcasted live to reveal the gang's mystery and satisfy the people's curiosity. Although it was a late-night broadcast, this live stream would definitely attract a lot of attention, and even the follow-up news would ferment. Please wait a moment, Hall Master Lin. I'll report to the station head immediately and request for manpower. I'm looking forward to your good news. After Nicole hung up the phone, her hand that was holding the phone trembled. If she could get this piece of news and create a sensation, her position in the TV station would be almost the same as the host, Andrew. She dialed the station head's phone. After the call was connected, Nicole ignored the station head's complaints and went straight to the point. Director, I have some breaking news. I need a team and a live broadcast channel. When the station head heard Nicole's voice, his sleepiness instantly disappeared. He asked tentatively, is it about Link? She asked. Yes, it's related to the Kylin Hall. No problem. I'll make the arrangements for you immediately. The entire late-night channel team will be under your command tonight. The station head was very bold and immediately transferred the entire late-night channel program team to Nicole. As the director of the Shadow TV station, he knew very well that Nicole, who had just changed her job to a reporter, had become the most popular star in the TV station. It was all because of a chance interview with Lin K by the Coliseum program team. After that, whenever there was news or reports about Link, Nicole would be the first to receive the news. As a 30-year-old station manager, in his eyes, Nicole was bound to Link. This kind of thing was not uncommon in the TV station. Some female hosts used their positions to get close to some rich and powerful people, using gentleness in exchange for some exclusive coverage opportunities, forming an unspeakable tacit understanding. However, the station head had always turned a blind eye to this kind of thing. No matter what method was used, as long as there was first-hand news, it would be enough. The station head quickly made a few phone calls. After arranging everything, he could not help but turn on the television. He switched to the Shadow TV station's late-night channel and waited for Nicole's big news about Link. One had to know that Link's reputation in the Sand City was now comparable to some of the big shots. In the eyes of the young people in the slums, Link was their idol. Relying on his own strength to obtain his current status in a short period of time, it made many young people see the hope of soaring to the sky in one go. The entire late-night channel has been sent out. Nicole, you must not let me down, the station head secretly sighed. It did not take long for Link to receive news of Nicole and the film crew's visit. After seeing Nicole, Link said apologetically, "I'm sorry for disturbing our head host's beauty sleep." "You must be joking, Hall Master Lin. It's my good fortune that you can still remember me when there's big news. I won't disturb you at any time." Nicole's cheeks were flushed and there was no sign of late-night fatigue. After all, for a woman who wanted to climb to the upper class, fame and fortune were the best supplement. Soon, Link led the group to a hidden basement in the backyard. "This is the basement. There are a total of 16 CCTV. You can connect the signal to the live broadcast equipment and switch the camera at any time. I've already prepared some snacks and drinks for you in the bathroom. Here, you can fully devote yourself to the live broadcast, and you don't have to worry about your safety. No matter what happens outside, don't go out." Link left the basement after saying everything he could. The late-night channel's members had originally been temporarily gathered together by the station head. When they heard that they would be going out with Nicole for a live broadcast, all of them were filled with resentment. But now, as he looked around, his face was filled with excitement. He didn't look like he had been complaining in the car. "You're all awake now," Nicole said in embarrassment. "Hee hee." The colleagues in the late-night channel all had apologetic expressions on their faces. "If we knew that Nicole had brought us to Kylin Hall, we would not need to rush you. We would have climbed up on our own." Kylin Hall. This was the most popular Kylin Hall in the entire Sand City. Not only did they enter the Kylin Hall, but they even came to the legendary Kylin Hall's backyard. He entered the underground surveillance room in the backyard. That kind of excitement was no different from a child who had received his favorite toy. "If it wasn't for Nicole, I'm afraid I would never have been able to come to this place in my life." "What?" A member rubbed his hands excitedly. "We rushed here overnight. Is there a live broadcast mission?" The corners of Nicole's mouth curled up into a mysterious smile. "You'll find out in a while. Now, hurry up and connect to the equipment. We're going to start the live broadcast." The members all got busy, and they were even more curious about the live broadcast. What kind of live broadcast could be done by staring at a bunch of surveillance cameras? After all the equipment was set up and the live stream was started, a sneaky figure appeared on the CCTV.